Hello student, welcome you to Mohan's classes. Today we are going to learn chapter 7 of your social study, which is the second chapter of your history section. The name of the chapter is Between the Two World Wars, that is the Russian Revolution and the Great Depression. And it is the part 3 of this chapter. Today we will discuss, in this part 3 we will discuss the war and the revolution of 1917. The war and the revolutions of 1917. The cycle of repression and reform brought a limited peace to Russia for a few years. As you know that in part 2 we have discussed that there were many secret organizations those were revolting against the Tsar and their government. So as there was a continuous cycle of repression and reformation, so because of that reason there was a limited peace in Russia. It was also only for few years. But after 1912, the workers' strike and peasant revolt again began to pick up steam. What happened? When it reached to 1912, again the workers and the peasant they revolt again. Understood? Again the peasant and workers they revolt against the Tsar government. However, when Russia was drawn into the First World War in 1914, a wave of patriotism flooded the country with people rallying behind the Tsar. So what happened? In the year of 1914, Russia also drawn into First World War, or Russia also joined in the First World War. So because of the First World War, there was a wave of patriotism flood in the country. And because of that reason, what happened? People start depending on the Tsar, or people start relying behind the Tsar. But the support for the war effort began fizzling out within 2 years as the horrors of the war and the continuous defeats Russia army faced the battlefield become evident. So in this sentence it is says that as the people they were supporting for the war, it began fizzling within 2 years. Why? Because the horror of the war was continuous and Russian army was continuously they were defeated on the battlefield, and that become an evident. Understood? The support of these workers and peasants become fizzled. Why? Because within these 2 years of the war, the horror of the war was continued, and the Russian army they were continually defeated in the battlefield. Disillusioned and exhausted, the soldier, workers and peasants began to demanding peace and food and land. So what happened? As these soldiers, armies, worker, peasant, they were continuously fighting in the First World War of 1914, but they continuously defeated by the enemy. So now what happened? Disillusion or exhausted means this army, peasant, soldiers and workers, they become tired. And they demand what? Peace to the Tsar government, because there was no peace, there was no food and no land for the people. That was the reason the people, the army, soldiers and the workers, they were continually or the demand for the peace, food and land. So in this paragraph we learn that as the repression and reform brought reformation and this repression brought a limited peace for the country Russia. But what happened again after the 1912? This worker and peasant again they start revolting against the Tsar government. But what happened? Russia joined into First World War in the year of 1914. So when Russia joined into First World War in the year of 1914, there was a wave of patriotism flood in the country, and people they relied on the Tsar. But what happened? The support for the war was fizzled within the 2 years. Why? As the war's horror reached into the stream or the turf, and many times Russia defeated by the enemies on the battlefield. As these soldiers, armies, workers, and peasants, they got tired and they were defeated by the enemies. They demand peace, food, and land to the Russian government. On Women's Day on February 23, 1917, the women took out a procession in Petrograd, the new name of Petersburg, demanding food and peace. Understood? On Women's Day, that is February 23rd, 1917, the women took out a procession. Where? In the Petrograd, that means the new name of Petersburg. For what? For the demand food and peace in the country. Next, there is difference of 13 days. There is a difference of 13 days between the Russian calendar and the modern calendar. So, the event occurred on March 8 according to the modern calendar. Look at here. We know that Women's Day we celebrate on March 8 every year. We celebrate Women's Day on March 8 every year. But look at here, where this one. On Women's Day, February 23. But why it is mentioned that February 23? So, there is a difference. Look at here, there is a difference of 13 days between the Russian calendar and the modern calendar. Understood? That's why it is February 23. Understood? It is according to the Russian calendar, they celebrated Women's Day on 23 of February, but actually according to modern calendar, it is March 8. So when there was a Women's Day celebration, so women they took out the procession for demanding what? Food and peace in their country. Soon after, workers and soldiers began taking out rallies across the city in support of these demands. So when the women start the procession for demanding food and peace, so soon after that, workers, soldiers, armies, and peasants they also began taking out rallies across the city for supporting for this demand, that means for peace and food. The police and army were restrained from intervening. Understood? The police and army were restrained from intervening. Worker assemblies were also organized in every factory in which the workers closed their representatives for an apex city level workers assembly. So the workers, those who are working in the factory, they also assemblies and organize in every factory and choose their representative for apex city level workers assembly. That means as we have talked in part 2 that they used to organize secret organization. So seems like that every factory workers they used to organize or they choose their representative for the apex city level or worker assemblies. These assemblies were called Soviets. Understood? These assembly were called what? Soviets. What is the meaning of Soviets? A Russian word similar to what? Panchayats. Understood? It is a Russian word. Which one? This Soviets. It is a Russian word and it is what? The meaning is what? Similar to Panchayats. The factory Soviets took over the management of their factories from the owners, taking all the decisions and implementing them. So what happened? The factory Soviets or the Panchayat, they took over the management of their factories. Earlier, the factory was managed by the owner of the factory, but now the Soviet or this organization used to handle or manage the factory and taking all the decision by this Soviet only, and they used to implement them. So in this paragraph what you learn, that means workers they assemble and they organized in every factory and they choose their representative for an apex city level. And what happened? These assemblies were called what? Soviet. That means it is a Russian word and the meaning is what? Similar to panchayat. After this organizing the Soviet, what happened? The Soviet took over all the management and taken all the decision and they also implement them. Their elected representatives were expected to voice the views of the factory Soviet in the city Soviet, which came to be known as the Petroguard Soviet. If they failed to do so, they could be recalled and another representatives elect in their place. So in this sentence it is said that their elected representatives were expected to voice the views of the factory Soviet in the city Soviet. Understood? Those who were elected as a representative in the Soviet, so they were expected or their duty was to voice in the city Soviet, because village factory Soviet was different and city Soviet was different. So this factory Soviet representatives, they were expected to voice or to speak on behalf of the workers in the city Soviet. So which came to be known as the Petroguard Soviet, and this will be called as what? Petroguard Soviet. Understood? First of all, this factory Soviet, those who are elected as a representative, they had to voice in the city Soviet, and this city Soviet, okay, when they come to Petrograd, because both the factory Soviet and the city Soviet, they join together, that is to call what? Petrograd Soviet. Next, if they fail to do so, they could be recalled another representatives elect in their place. That means this factory Soviet and this city Soviet, if they are not doing their duty, they are not raising their voice, then people can, or the workers and peasants, they could elect another representatives in place of them. The soldiers to form their Soviet in their unit, taking over control from their officers or forcing them to act on their orders. As like workers and peasants, the soldiers also form their Soviets. Understood? Seems like the factory worker, the soldiers also form their Soviets in their every unit, and they took control over their unit, or they took control of their officers and forcing them to act on their orders. That means the officers were forced to work according to the order of this soldiers Soviet. Peasants also formed their Soviets in the village, where they began to looting shops and patiala house of the landowners. Seems like that what happened? Peasants also formed their Soviets in the villages and they began looting the shops, patiala houses of the landowners. So, in this paragraph we will learn that the representative of this worker Soviet or the factory Soviet had to raise their voice in the city Soviet, and this was known as what? Petrograd Soviet. If any of the Petrograd Soviet failed to raise their voice and fulfill the demand of people, then this factory worker could recall or re-elect the representative in place of them. Seems like that soldiers also formed their Soviet in their units, and they taken control over their officers and forced them to work according to their orders. Seems like that peasants also formed their Soviets in the villages and they start looting the shops and patiala houses of the landowners. Within days, the Tsar was stripped of all powers as the people in all sectors took over control through their Soviets. So what happened? In this within a days or within few days, the Tsar, he lost all his power. That means all of his power were taken by the people. How? Because in every sector, if it's a factory sector, if it's a workers, peasant, or you can say soldiers, everywhere they formed Soviet and they ruled by themselves and they taken control of their unit. So in this all the control was taken from Tsar through Soviet. In this way the power structure of the Tsarist regime was dismantled with the people taking power into their own hands. So what happened? In this way all the power of the Tsarist was dismantled or destroyed. Next, people took all the power into their own hands. So, this is what we learn about the war and the revolution of 1917, or we can say the Russian Revolution. So, in this way, the people of Russia did the revolution on the year of or in the year of 1917. Hope all of you understood. Next class on the part 4 we will learn about abdication of the Tsar. Abdication of the Tsar, that means how Tsar left his throne or left his post.